The sun was high over the University of Midvale, casting a golden glow on the old stone buildings and the neat green lawns. Graduation day had come at last. Families filled the courtyard, laughter echoed, cameras flashed, navy blue gowns rustled in the breeze. It was a day of pride, of achievement, and for one young woman, a day the world would never forget. Her name was Naomi Okafor. She stood near a fountain, a little apart from the crowd, letting the cool water calm her nerves. Naomi wasn't just graduating. She was the top of her class, the valedictorian, the first in her family to go to college, let alone law school. Her brown skin glowed under the midday sun. Her tightly coiled hair, swept up in a regal bun, shimmered like a crown. Underneath her gown, she wore a plum-colored silk dress. It hugged her figure softly. It was bold. It was beautiful. It was her way of saying, "I belong here." Naomi had worked for this moment, not just in books or exams, but in life. Her mother was a librarian who worked double shifts. Her father, a mechanic who could fix anything, except the broken ways of the world. They had raised her with love, with grit, with a belief that no matter what, you fight for your place. And now, here she was, a young woman from the modest streets of East Brentwood, standing at the edge of greatness. Her phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. "Almost there, love. You're going to crush it today." It was from Ethan Marlowe, her boyfriend of 2 years. Naomi smiled. Ethan had been her rock. With his easy laugh and quiet strength, he'd balanced her fire. They had fallen in love over late-night study sessions, cups of coffee that turned into hours of talk, jazz club nights filled with dreams. But today was more than just Naomi's graduation. Today she was going to meet his family, the Marlowes. They were old money, Chicago socialites, a family of lawyers, CEOs, and politicians. Ethan had always told Naomi, "Don't worry, they'll love you." But deep down, Naomi could feel it, a difference, a wall she hadn't yet seen, but had already begun to feel. She looked up, and there they were. Ethan, handsome in his gray suit, walked toward her with that familiar smile, but behind him followed 3 people who moved with practiced grace and quiet judgment. His mother, Charlotte Marlowe, tall and icy in a cream designer dress. His father, Gerald, all business in a sharp navy suit, and his sister, Claire, draped in elegance with hair that looked like it had its own publicist. They stopped a few feet from Naomi. "Naomi," Ethan said, pulling her in for a quick hug. "You look amazing." "Thanks," she whispered. "Ready for the circus?" He chuckled, but his eyes flicked toward his family. A shadow passed through them. Charlotte stepped forward, her smile cool and distant. "Naomi, what a pleasure," she said, barely touching Naomi's hand. "That dress is quite a statement." Naomi kept her voice calm. "Thank you, Mrs. Marlowe. I wanted to mark the occasion." The word statement floated in the air like a quiet insult, subtle, sharp, a suggestion that Naomi was somehow out of place. Gerald gave a tight nod. "Ethan's told us about you," he said flatly. "Law school's no joke. You must have worked hard to keep up." Naomi's spine straightened. "I did more than keep up. I graduated at the top of my class." Claire's laugh was light, but cutting. "On a scholarship, right? That's lucky. Not everyone gets those kinds of breaks." Naomi looked her in the eyes. "Luck favors the prepared. I made sure I was." They were testing her, every glance, every word, carefully placed to remind her, "You're not one of us." Naomi had been through this before. Teachers who questioned her skills, classmates who whispered about quotas, people who saw her skin before her mind. But this was different. This was Ethan's family, and their judgment wasn't just about school, it was about her. Still, she stood tall. Ethan placed a hand gently on her back. "Naomi's incredible," he said, trying to fill the silence. "Her speech is going to blow everyone away." Charlotte gave a slow nod. "I'm sure it'll be memorable." Then she turned to Ethan. "Darling, we should find our seats. You'll want a good view of the stage." Naomi watched as they walked away, her heart heavy but her chin still high. Behind their polished smiles, behind their perfect clothes, she saw it. They didn't think she belonged, but what they didn't know was that Naomi had a voice, a powerful one, and when she stepped on that stage, the world would hear it. She turned toward the auditorium, her heels clicking against the stone. It was her day, and no one, not even the Marlowes, could take that from her. Not today, not ever. The air inside the auditorium pulsed with quiet energy. Rows of graduates sat in perfect lines, tassels swaying, families whispering, cameras clicking. Everyone waited for the speeches to begin. Naomi stood backstage, holding her note cards, her breath slow and steady. Her plum dress shimmered under the stage lights, the silk catching the glow with every movement. Her gown flowed around her like armor, her high bun a crown of quiet defiance. She could hear her name being introduced. Naomi Okafor, Valedictorian of the University of Midvale Law School. Applause rippled through the room. Naomi stepped forward. Her heels clicked like a gavel. The spotlight hit her, full and bright. She paused, looked out at the sea of faces, and found Ethan's eyes in the front row. He smiled up at her, but his glance shifted quickly toward his mother. Charlotte sat with a faint smile on her lips, one that didn't reach her eyes. Claire and Gerald flanked her like bodyguards, their expressions unreadable. Naomi let her eyes pass over them. Then she spoke. "Today, we stand on the edge of something bigger than ourselves." Her voice was strong, warm, clear. She told them about her parents, her mother reshelving books until her back ached, her father coming home with oil on his hands but hope in his eyes. She spoke about the nights she studied under flickering lights, the whispers of doubt she'd drowned out one chapter at a time. "I've had to fight," she said, "not just for grades, but for space. Space to speak, space to stand, space to be seen." The room was silent, hanging on her words. She told stories of classmates who'd questioned her right to be there, professors who spoke over her until her arguments were too sharp to ignore. She spoke of justice, not as a word in a textbook, but as a promise, a duty. "Law," she said, "isn't just about rules. It's about people, about seeing those who've been silenced and standing with them." A tear rolled down a professor's cheek. Another stood and clapped softly before the speech was even done. But Naomi didn't look away from the Marlowes, not even once. Charlotte's lips were tight. Gerald crossed his arms. Claire rolled her eyes and whispered something only her father could hear. Naomi kept going. Her voice rose, not loud, but certain. "I carry the voices of those who couldn't stand here. And today, I do it proudly." When she finished, the room stood. Applause filled the space like thunder rolling across the ceiling. Naomi's chest lifted. Her heart beat strong. But when she stepped off the stage and made her way back to Ethan, something in the air had shifted. He clapped, yes. He even looked proud. But his family? They stayed seated. Charlotte's face was still. Claire looked bored. Gerald didn't even lift his hands. Naomi approached. She smiled anyway because that's what she'd always done. But then Charlotte's voice cut through the celebration. "Ethan, dear," she said, standing and adjusting her dress. "Let's go take a photo at the podium, just the family." Naomi paused. Charlotte's gaze brushed past her as if she were invisible. Claire's voice followed, syrupy sweet. "Yeah, Naomi, I'm sure you've got friends to pose with." Naomi's smile didn't crack, but her heart did. She looked at Ethan. He hesitated, his hand half reached for her. Then he sighed. "It's just one photo, Naomi. We'll take some together later." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Ethan, this isn't about a photo. It's about them not seeing me." He opened his mouth, but Charlotte was already pulling him away by the elbow. Gerald and Claire followed without a word. Naomi stood still, surrounded by people, yet completely alone. A professor passed by and gently touched her arm. "Naomi, your speech was extraordinary." She nodded, whispered a thank you, but her eyes stayed on Ethan. In the distance, she heard Claire's voice again. "Cute speech. Little dramatic, don't you think?" Charlotte's laugh floated after it. "She's articulate, I'll give her that. But idealism doesn't last long in real law." Naomi turned away, her fingers tightening around the diploma case in her hands. She'd just made history, and still, she was a stranger in their world. But she wasn't leaving. Not yet. Dinner was coming next. A private rooftop restaurant. Another battlefield. Another test. And this time, she wouldn't just be making a speech. She'd be deciding who truly deserved to stand beside her. The rooftop restaurant shimmered under soft golden lights. Crystal glasses sparkled. Silverware clinked against porcelain, and the scent of something expensive drifted through the warm Chicago air. Naomi stood at the edge of the room, her heels silent against the marble floor. Her plum silk dress caught the chandelier's glow, just as it had hours earlier on stage. Her high bun stood tall, polished, unwavering. The dinner was meant to be a celebration, but to Naomi it already felt like a trial. She sat beside Ethan at the long table, the skyline glittering behind them. His hand rested on hers beneath the linen cloth, fingers warm but tense. Across from her, the Marlowes looked as if they'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Charlotte, in a cream silk blouse that didn't wrinkle no matter how she moved. Gerald, slicing into his steak like it owed him money. And Claire, scrolling her phone with one hand while sipping from a glass with the other. Every move was sharp, calculated, measured. The server refilled Naomi's water. Charlotte set down her wine and smiled, that same tight, practiced smile. "Naomi," she said sweetly, "your speech was passionate. Where did you grow up again? Somewhere vibrant, I imagine." Naomi kept her tone even. "East Brentwood. A strong community. My parents worked hard, gave me everything they could." Charlotte nodded, but her eyes flicked away. "Of course." Then Claire looked up, her voice playful. "East Brentwood? Huh. That's surprising. I mean, from there to Valedictorian? Wow. That's not exactly the usual path." Naomi smiled, small but sharp. "Hard work bridges every gap. I built mine step by step." Claire laughed softly. "Right, sure." Then Gerald finally spoke. "Public interest law, isn't it? Noble work, but not much of a paycheck. Ethan's always had a certain lifestyle." Naomi met his eyes. "I fight for justice, Mr. Marlowe. That's worth more to me than a big salary." Her voice was steady, her bun unshaken. Ethan squeezed her hand tighter but still said nothing. Charlotte leaned back, swirling her wine. "How admirable," she said. "Though I imagine it must be exhausting, always dealing with such heavy issues." Naomi's stomach tightened, but she leaned forward. "It's not exhausting. It's fulfilling. Every tenant I help, every child I represent. It's why I became a lawyer." Her words landed like stones dropped gently into a still pond. Claire raised an eyebrow. "But doesn't that get depressing? You must see some wild stuff, definitely not dinner party material." Naomi kept her eyes steady. "I see people fighting for dignity. That's not wild, that's human." Claire blinked, just for a moment. Her smirk faltered. But then Charlotte pressed on. You mentioned a scholarship earlier. Was that one of those diversity-based ones? Naomi's heart pounded once. Then she smiled. I earned it. Top grades, top scores. No one gave me anything I didn't fight for. Charlotte nodded, but there was no warmth in it. They're very generous with those, I hear. Naomi swallowed hard. Generosity has nothing to do with it, she said softly. I earned my place. Then Claire added lightly, Must be tough, though. Always having to prove you deserve to be in the room. I mean, not everyone sees you as valedictorian material. That did it. Naomi's fork clinked against her plate. She looked up, not with anger, but with something stronger. Resolve. She'd faced prejudice before, but this was different. This was dressed in pearls and silk, served with wine and small talk. This was not a misunderstanding. This was rejection, wrapped in politeness. And Ethan, the man sitting beside her, still hadn't said a word. The server returned with dessert, creme brulee, golden, glowing. But the tension at the table didn't melt. It hardened. Then Charlotte leaned in, her voice low, almost kind. Naomi, Ethan's future comes with certain expectations. I'm sure you understand. Naomi stared at her for a moment. That wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning, the kind that smiled as it sliced. Naomi's hand rested on her lap. Her diploma might have been in another room, but it felt heavy in her palm all over again. She had worked too hard, come too far, to let this moment shrink her. But she said nothing, because she wasn't done yet. The next move would be hers, and the Marlowes had no idea what was coming. The chandelier above the dining room glowed like a crown of glass, but the air beneath it was cold. The creme brulee sat untouched. Conversation had turned quiet, but the tension, it was loud. Naomi sat tall, her bun still perfect, her hands folded gently in her lap. The Marlowes had poked and prodded all evening, every word like a thread trying to pull her apart, but she hadn't unraveled. Not yet. She had stayed calm. She had stayed kind. But now, something inside her had shifted. The server approached their table. His voice was gentle. Ms. Okafor, the organizers would love for you to say a few words, if you're willing. Naomi stood. Ethan looked up at her, uncertain at first. Then he gave a small nod. Around the room, professors and legal guests looked toward her with curiosity and warmth. These were the city's top lawyers, scholars, leaders, and in this room, the Marlowes were not in charge. Naomi walked to the center. Her heels clicked softly. She turned toward the room, her bun gleaming under the lights. Tonight, she began, we're not just celebrating a degree. We're celebrating a promise. She let the silence breathe. I stand here because of sacrifice, my parents, and mine, because I refuse to let doubt or tradition decide my future. She spoke not like she was proving anything, but like she already belonged. Because she did. She talked about the tenants she helped, the asylum cases she took on, the nights she stayed up until 3 a.m. building arguments for people the system tried to forget. She wasn't asking for their approval. She was showing them who she was. The room leaned in, but not everyone was clapping. At the table behind her, Charlotte Marlowe crossed her arms. Claire's smirk returned. Gerald's face was unreadable. Naomi finished her speech with calm fire. I don't just wear this gown. I carry every child who was told they weren't enough, every student who walked into a room like this and wondered if they belonged. And I'm here to say, we do. We always have. The applause was thunderous. Some people stood. Some clapped slowly. A few wiped their eyes. Naomi walked back to her seat, her head high. But just before she sat, Claire spoke, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Cute speech. Very rags to riches. Bit of a cliché, though, don't you think? Naomi stopped. Then Charlotte added lightly, She's fiery, but it all feels a little theatrical for Ethan's world. The clapping faded. The room quieted again. Naomi turned to Ethan. Her voice dropped. "Say something." He looked at her, frozen, his jaw clenched, but no words came. That silence hit harder than any insult. Naomi stepped away from the table. She faced them, all of them. "Mrs. Marlowe, Claire, Mr. Marlowe." Her voice was low, but it carried. "You've questioned where I come from, my work, my scholarship, my presence at this table." She looked at each of them. "But let's be honest. What you're really questioning is my skin, my heritage, and the fact that I love Ethan in a world you believe belongs to you." Gasps rippled around the room. Charlotte's wineglass trembled slightly. Claire's face paled. "I earned this place," Naomi said. "Every night I studied until my eyes burned. Every paper I wrote while the world doubted me. I carry every scar and every win. I am a lawyer, a daughter, a fighter." Her gaze swept across the guests. "And I am more than enough for this room, for this career, for your son." She turned to Ethan. "I don't need to be saved, Ethan, but I need to know. Will you stand beside me? Or will you keep hiding behind their silence?" Ethan stood. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. His voice was tight but firm. "Enough," he said, looking at his family. "Naomi is the most incredible person I've ever met. She's brilliant, brave, and she's my future. If you can't respect her, you're pushing me out of this family." The room held its breath. Charlotte's lips parted, but no words came. Claire stared at the table. Gerald looked like he'd swallowed a rock. Naomi didn't move. Her silence was louder than applause. Ethan reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. Because now he had chosen not just love, but truth. The chandelier sparkled above them, but the table felt like a battlefield. The Marlowes sat in silence, broken, shaken, exposed. Naomi held Ethan's hand, her posture calm, her breath steady, her high bun glowing beneath the soft lights like a final act of defiance. She had said what needed to be said. And the room? It had listened, but this dinner wasn't over. Charlotte, still clutching her wine glass, finally found her voice. "Ethan, darling, you're being dramatic," she said, trying to force a smile. "We're simply looking out for your future." Naomi turned her head slightly. That smile? It was cracked now. The power Charlotte had walked in with was slipping. Before Naomi could speak again, a new voice cut through the air. "Miss Okafor," it said, calm, clear, commanding. Professor Elaine Carter, the legendary constitutional law expert with silver hair and fire in her eyes, stepped into the light. Her voice carried across the room, even though she barely raised it. "I'd like a word." Naomi stood, surprised. Her bun didn't move. Elaine gave a soft nod. "I've just spoken with the managing partners at Kessler and Lane," she said loud enough for the Marlowes to hear. "They've followed your work, your record, your conviction, and they'd like to offer you a position as senior associate, with a clear path to partner." The words fell into the room like thunder. A ripple spread across the guests. Kessler and Lane? That wasn't just a job offer. That was a dream, a golden door, a spotlight in the world of law, and it had just opened, for her. Naomi blinked. For the first time all evening, she was speechless. Elaine smiled. "They said your name with respect, as they should." She looked toward the Marlowes, her gaze cool, her message clear. Naomi turned to Charlotte, to Gerald, to Claire. They weren't speaking now. They were watching her, as they should have from the beginning. Charlotte cleared her throat. "Well, that's quite impressive, Naomi. We didn't realize—" Naomi held her gaze. "You didn't ask." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Claire looked down at her hands. Gerald stared at his wine. Their power was gone, undone by truth. And Ethan? He stood straighter, his shoulders lighter, his grip on Naomi's hand now firm, no longer nervous. "I meant what I said," he told his family. "If you can't respect her, we're done." The words were final, a line in the sand. The room around them seemed to exhale. Claire's voice cracked as she whispered, "Naomi, I was wrong. You're amazing. I'm sorry." Naomi gave her a long look. "Thank you," she said. "But words are a start. Actions matter more." Professor Carter nodded in approval before returning to her table. Guests leaned in to offer congratulations. Their warmth washed over Naomi like sunlight breaking through clouds. For the first time that day, she felt seen by the whole room. And not just for being Ethan's girlfriend, not just for being top of the class, but for being herself. That night, as they walked along the river under the hum of streetlights, Ethan reached for her hand again. "You okay?" he asked. Naomi smiled. "Better than okay," she said. "I'm building something real, with you, with this life." The job at Kessler and Lane was just the beginning. Her days now filled with real cases, real change. Her nights filled with quiet laughter and hard-earned rest. Ethan didn't just say the right things anymore. He did them. He skipped his family's next gala when they refused to acknowledge Naomi's name. He signed up for a workshop on racial bias. He listened more, learned more, stumbled sometimes, but kept walking beside her. And one day, Naomi received a message from Claire. "Can we talk? I'm trying to understand." Naomi agreed to meet. Claire came with questions and left with more, but she tried. Even Gerald reached out, invited her to lunch. He asked about housing equity, about her work. The meeting was awkward, stiff, but real. Vivian, Charlotte, never apologized. But Naomi didn't need her to. Her light didn't need their permission to shine. In a small jazz club with their friends, lawyers, coders, artists, Naomi stood up during a toast. Ethan raised his glass and said, "To Naomi, who is completely unstoppable." The room cheered. Her laugh was full, her heart steady, and her bun? Still perfect. She'd stood on stage, she'd stood at the table, and now she stood in the world, not begging to be let in, but building the door herself. And no one, not even the Marlowes, could close it behind her.